Hello and welcome to this episode of Weekly Bytes, where we take a tech topic and break it down for you in under 10 minutes. Last time we talked about why we would even use Terraform, but this time we're talking about the Terraform IPA. No, I'm not talking about Indian Pale Ale. I'm talking about init, plan and apply. And this time we're talking about init. So let's get in it. To do anything, we're going to need some code. If you run Terraform Init on your empty directory, it's pretty much just going to tell you that the directory has no Terraform configuration files and that you have to create something to get started with this process. So how do we write some Terraform config though? Copy pasta, of course. Terraform's documentation is pretty extensive and you can find loads of example configurations to get started with. Let's try out the local provider. We'll just go ahead and copy this piece of code here, and then we'll take that over to our terminal. So if we just go ahead and copy and paste this guy into a main.tf file, you'll see that we have a pretty simple resource that just creates a local file. We don't need to worry about anything else right now. We're going to just create a piece of config called a resource, and the syntax looks like this. So a few points to cover here. Terraform is written in a language called HCL, or HashiCorp Configuration Language. Now this might look a bit strange at first, but the whole point of this was to create a language that is human friendly and also machine friendly. To illustrate this, let's take a look at this example in traditional JSON. Right off the bat, you'll notice that HCL is a lot shorter. On top of that, we have a lot less quotation marks, curly braces, and square brackets to deal with. At a high level, we're defining an object of type local file. This portion, after the resource declaration, usually has the format of the provider name first, then the resource it provides. So a provider called local, and we are creating a file. Foo is the object's name. In between the curly braces will be the arguments this resource needs to be provisioned. In this case, content, as well as file name. Traditionally, we'd have to tell Terraform some provider information, but if you don't, it just assumes that you just want to get the one written by HashiCorp, which this one is. So to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to go ahead and run a Terraform Init. And if you take a closer look, you'll see that it did just that. It went and got the HashiCorp local provider. It got one that is signed by HashiCorp. It also created this Terraform lock file, which they also mention is important to commit to source control, which, as stated, will help Terraform select the correct provider versions to match the ones you use to write this code. So the Terraform lock file looks a little bit like this. You'll notice that there are a few fields here. First field being the provider field. This mentions the provider that we have just downloaded. There's also a version mentioned here, as well as some hashes. Terraform will use these hashes to compare against any provider that it downloads to make sure that it completely matches the provider that you use to write this code. So if we'll do another Terraform Init now, you'll notice that right here in the Terraform Init, it mentions the Terraform plan, which is the very next Terraform command we'll cover in our next Weekly Byte. That's a wrap and the end of this episode of Weekly Bytes. I hope you learned something about Terraform Init. If that was a bit too far ahead, go back and watch this video on why we even use Terraform in the first place. If you found value out of that, like, comment and subscribe. And if you're looking for more of my content, you'll find that right over here.